not financial instruments. They are not financial instruments. Okay? Remember, you can have limited life intangibles, and you can have, I think the book calls it indefinite life intangibles. Okay, limited life intangibles are examples of that. Well, limited life intangibles are intangibles whose life is limited by some regulatory, legal, contractual, or other requirement. So an example would be a patent, which is limited by a contractual, the legal life, the patent. Then we have a franchise that is limited by the contractual life of the franchise agreement. Okay, another limited life would be what?
Copyright.
A copyright, which is the life of the creator plus 70 years. It may be very long, but it's still limited. It's not forever. Another one would be non-compete covenants. Another would be a customer list. These are things that have a limited span. Now, what would be some indefinite life intangibles? Well, one would be a trademark. Another would be a brand name. Another would be an internet domain name. Another would be goodwill. Now, is it possible that something can move from over here to over here? Yes. For example, when General Motors decided to discontinue the Saturn line of automobiles, one of the requirements of a trade name is, in order to keep it, you have to continue to use it. Well, if you're going to discontinue the manufacturing Saturn automobiles, then you're not going to manufacture the parts for them anymore. What's the reason for keeping and using that trade name? So it can move from an unlimited life or an indefinite life over to limited life under certain circumstances. You may discontinue a brand, and the same thing would happen. Okay, now, with respect to amortization, it's over the lesser of legal life or useful life. It is over the lesser of legal life or useful life. So if you determine you've got a patent that has a remaining life of 15 years, but you have a useful life of only 10 years, then you would amortize it over the 10 years, the lesser of the two. All right? For these, you don't amortize them because you don't have a legal life or useful life. They have an indefinite life. Therefore, you don't amortize them. For limited life intangibles, the impairment test is twofold. Number one is the recoverability test. And if you fail that one, you then apply the fair value test. And then for the indefinite life, it's only a fair value test. It's only a fair value test. And that is really the bulk of chapter 12 and 1 page of notes.
What about the impairment of goodwill? The impairment of goodwill?
What about it?
We did it with Dr. Harden. So
You didn't do it with Dr.
We
Hart?
did.
Okay, well, yes.
Maybe you can like go over it again.
You have to, oh, you want me to go over it again?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay. Let's turn, where was one of them? Goodwill, okay, I think it's only one of them is a problem. Problem 4.
What page is that?
645.
Thank you.
Okay, problem 4 on page 645. On July 31 of 17, Mexico Company paid $3 million to acquire all of the common stock of Conchita Incorporated, which became a division of Mexico. Conchita reported the following balance sheet at the time of acquisition. Okay, they had current assets of $800,000 and non-current assets of $2,700,000. So they had total assets of $3,500,000. They had liabilities of $600,000 and long-term liabilities of $500,000 and stockholders' equity of $2,400,000. It was determined at the date of the purchase that the fair value of the identifiable net assets was $2,750,000. Okay. So the fair value paid was $3 million.
Bless you.
The fair value received is $2,750,000. Goodwill is the excess fair value paid in excess of the fair value of the identifiable net assets acquired. And the identifiable net assets acquired is $2,750,000. Therefore, goodwill is equal to $250,000. $250,000 is goodwill. And I think that is the answer to question A. Is there goodwill, and if so, how much? Let's look. Compute the amount of goodwill, if any, recognized on July 31 of 17. Well, there you have it. $250,000. Look at the next thing it says. In addition, over the next 6 months of operations, the newly purchased division experienced operating losses. In addition, it now appears that it will generate substantial losses for the foreseeable future. At December 31, Conchita reports the following balance sheet information. Okay, we have current assets, $450,000. We have non-current assets, including goodwill recognized in the purchase. Would you please write above the word goodwill, $250,000? Then they have current liabilities and long-term liabilities. So right now, the book value of the identifiable assets is $1,650,000, including the $250,000 of goodwill. It is determined that the fair value of the Conchita division is $1,850,000. Okay, stop. If the fair value is $1,850,000 and the book value is $1,650,000, do you have a goodwill impairment? No. The fair value is greater than the carrying value, therefore there is no impairment. So the answer to B is determine the impairment loss, if any, to be recognized on December 31st of 17. The answer is 0, because the fair value is greater than the book value. Let's read the next sentence. The recorded amount of Conchita's net assets, excluding the goodwill, is the same as the fair value, except for property, plant, and equipment, which has a fair value of $150,000 above the carrying value. Okay, C. Assume that the fair value of the Conchita division is $1,600,000 instead of $1,850,000. Determine the impairment loss, if any, to be recorded at December 31 of 17. Okay, so now the book value is $1,650,000, the fair value is $1,600,000. So you have a goodwill impairment. Now, are you with me? Okay, so now listen, you gotta listen carefully. What you do once you determine there is a goodwill impairment, which we just did, is you say, okay, I'm gonna go back to my book value and that is $1,650,000. That's my book value. Are you with me? I'm going to throw out my goodwill. And I'm going to add the fair value write-up for my PP&E. They told me it's $150,000 higher than the book value. Right? Okay, so this gives me the fair value of the identifiable net assets. What is that, $1,550,000?
Yes.
This is the fair value minus goodwill. The fair value of everything, I just left that out, is $1,600,000, right? Isn't that what they told me? Isn't that what they told me?
Yes.
In part C, the fair value of everything is $1,600,000. Therefore, how much must be the value of the goodwill? Huh? 50. The fair value minus the goodwill is $1,550,000. The fair value of everything, including the goodwill, is $1,600,000. So the fair value of the goodwill is only $50,000. So how much is the impairment of the goodwill? $200,000. $200,000. Questions? Questions? Now, if I were you, I'd make a note card. And up at the top, I'd write impairment of goodwill. Step 1. Compare the book value of the reportable unit with the fair value of the reportable unit. Okay? Now, I hope you know from right there, can you determine if there's a goodwill impairment? How do you know? If the fair value is less than the book value. Okay, so step 2. If the fair value is less than the book value, you have a goodwill impairment. Okay. Step 3. Determine the fair value of the reporting unit without goodwill. Determine the fair value of the reporting unit without goodwill. Step 4. Compare the fair value of the reporting unit without goodwill to the fair value of the reporting unit including goodwill. This gives you the implied value of goodwill. This gives you the implied value of the goodwill. Step 5. Determine the goodwill impairment. By comparing the book value of goodwill with the implied value of the goodwill. Determine the goodwill impairment by comparing the implied value of the goodwill with the book value of the goodwill. Now, if you want to put some numbers attached with what we just did, step 1 tells you to compare the fair value of the reporting unit with the book value of the reporting unit, right? So the fair value is $1,006,000. the book value is $1,650,000. Therefore, you have a goodwill impairment. Right? What did step 2 say?
If fair value is less than the book value,
Then you have a goodwill impairment. Okay? What does step 3 say?
determine the fair value of the
Determine the fair value of the reporting unit without goodwill. That's key, without goodwill. So look, here was the book value, and I threw out the book value of goodwill, but I added in the fair value adjustment for PP&E because everything else was the same. So this gives me the fair value without goodwill. The fair value without goodwill is $1,550,000. The fair value of everything is $1,600,000. So what's the implied value of the goodwill? 50. So what's the goodwill impairment? 200. So you can write those down and put numbers attached to it and say, see problem 4 in chapter 12. To walk back through that process. Does that help? Are there any other specific questions from chapter 12?
number 1. The one I had emailed.
Oh, Lord. But I answered it. Did you get my answer?
I haven't. I responded back to you, but I don't know. I asked because
She was talking about timberland. What should